Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy and delighted to be moderating such an interesting panel with very prominent VCs in the market. Both, a lot of them founders turned into funders. So, and the current landscape, whether Egypt or globally, requires a lot of thought in what's going to happen next. So without further ado, I would like to have my panelists introduce themselves and introduce their businesses and funds. And I'll start with Wael.
I'm actually going to give the mic to the newest announcement of a VC here. So maybe Ameer.
طيب ازيكم جميعا. انا امير شريف. انا كنت الفاوندر اوف وظف وفرصنا. وجاست recently يعني I moved from the founder side to the VC side, joined fund اسمهم Khwarizmi Ventures based في السعودية, investing across the region, $70 million fund, investing in seed to early stage, seed to series A.
Thank you, Ameer. It's a pleasure to be with everybody here, and thanks to the VLab team for having us. أنا اسمي Eslam Darwish. I'm the founding general partner of the Nclude FinTech Fund. I'm also a recently turned venture capital person, but previously I was a product guy, so I'm a FinTech geek by profession. And so I decided to enter the VC world recently, and as many of you may know, we've launched the Nclude FinTech Fund, which is an investment platform that is Egypt-centric, focused on investing on early and growth stage startups in Egypt as well as across the Middle East and Africa region. Our mandate is twofold. One is to solve for financial inclusion in Egypt and Middle East Africa. والحاجة الثانية إن إحنا position مصر as a fintech hub for the entire region. So it's a very exciting mandate and a huge opportunity, and looking forward to partner with the ecosystem to deliver it, inshallah.
Hello everyone, I'm Rafeh Saleh. I'm also new to the game. Everything we say today, just don't take it for granted. So I'm the founding partner of Cubit Ventures. It's a recently formed fund. It's a $20 million fund. We've done 4 deals already. We're closing our 5th deal this month. And we're still learning the ropes. We're Egypt focused, we're sector agnostic. So it's more about the business model rather than the sector. So we like to study the business model well and see that we can take it globally. We're part of 2 global networks, the Founders Youth Global Network, and my partner Paul Bregel co-created 7 other funds across the world, and we're bringing this global network to our portfolio companies.
اهلا وسهلا. انا اسمي وائل نافع. انا partner في Raed Ventures. Raed Ventures is an early stage VC firm. We invest in seed and pre-seed stage companies and follow on until hopefully they are ready to go IPO. انا برضو زي البانelists اللي معايا هنا كنت entrepreneur founder. انا قبل ما join Raed كنت ال VP of product في كريم, وقبليها كنت founder ل3 شركات قبل كده. 2 منهم فشلوا وواحدة منهم got acquired. فيعني ايه, انا حاسس باللي founders بيحسوا بيه, ودي احد الحاجات اللي احنا يعني ايه بنركز فيها برضو واحنا بنتكلم فيها مع الستارت ابس عشان يبقى في level of empathy والدiscussions معاهم.
بص, احنا النهارده هنحاول نخلي الدiscussion دي very informal. A lot of questions, brainstorming about what's next, rather than sort of a formal discussion with like strict questions. بس في البداية كده, I'd like to get your interview, and I'm throwing a question out, not for anyone, but whoever wants to pick it. Given the global circumstances of what's happening globally and regionally, where do you see VC investment in the coming period? And what's the global effect has on the VC landscape in Egypt? And if nobody will take, I'll pick on one.
Okay. So for sure there is a global crunch, there is no doubt, right? That the entire world is facing, and it's creating, like any crisis environment, a reality check, right? Obviously, it's raising money is becoming much more expensive than it was. Access to capital is becoming more difficult, and that by definition does impact the growth in the ecosystem from a global point of view. Egypt is part of the global economy, so do we get impacted? Oh, absolutely yes. Our entire region gets impacted, right? But at varying degrees from the rest of the world. I think the great news for us as a region is the fundamentals of our opportunity, وتحديدا في مصر, okay, remain the same, right? So if I were to just be a little bit biased and talk about fintech for a second and financial inclusion, so what's happening around the world versus now, financial inclusion opportunity في مصر مستمر, right? It's still a huge opportunity that we can capitalize on, that we should invest behind, that we should support founders that are solving for it to unlock a commercial opportunity الموجودة, right? So yes, there is a global challenge. It does have some level of impact, okay? But it's one that makes you revisit how you execute, but not whether or not you should execute. Does that make sense?
Very good. Going back to Wael on this one, do you sort of agree with what he's saying? Because you're seeing you're investing across the region, not only in Egypt. I think you're also investing in Pakistan, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell us sort of how does Egypt compare to the other countries that you're investing in?
طيب مبدئيا خلينا نقول كم حاجة. الجلوبال ايكونوميك تيرمويل اللي بيحصل دلوقتي هيأثر او تأثيره الأساسي شايفينه في الشركات اللي وصلت للسيريز A و B والستيجز الكبيرة. أتوقع إن معظم الشركات اللي لسه في السيد ستيج ما حسيتش بالأثر ده لسه، ما فيش downward pressure على ال valuations as much إلا في cases نادرة يعني. وأظن إن التركيز للفي سيز دلوقتي على founders أقوياء هيفضل الموضوع كده، ولكن business models that are by nature burn heavy is probably where the early stage startups will see some pushback. Investors will probably want to think twice whether they want to fund such a burn heavy model early. If your startup is showing a very solid plan that is not relying on heavy burn, fundamentally growing your business in a good way, you're not going to find issues. Now the question you were asking Amr about how does it differ? To be honest, يعني احنا the majority of our investments بتاعت Raed Ventures are between Egypt, Saudi and UAE. We're not seeing any fundamental difference between both. بسبب كذا حاجة. طبعا economic crisis هتأثر على كله بنفس الطريقة. Growth stage capital is becoming a little bit more scarce. بس الفاندمنتالز في مصر بتشجعنا ان احنا حاسين ان البوتنشال عالي جدا جدا جدا. فبالتالي الموضوع overall البنفيتس بتاعت كل بلد الميكس بتاع السترينثs and areas of development كل بلد are different. overall I would say ان مصر is still positioned very very strongly. المانديت بتاعنا احنا كفند is still to focus very very strongly على مصر. فبالتالي I don't see a difference. الديفرنسز اللي هنلاقيها بين ال different stages of the startups وال type of business model will burn dynamics أو ال discipline بتاع ال founders.
أنا النقطة دي بقى هرجع لها تاني بالنسبة اللي هي ال different stages، بس هرجع وأسأل رافع. You're investing in seed and pre-seed stage. How do you see the market دلوقتي? Are you seeing good opportunities? Are you investing? What's your outlook?
Sure, now we invest in seed, not pre-seed. I want to build on two things. You've mentioned the burn rate as well, and I totally agree on that. I think the notion of grow at all costs is being revised at the moment across the world, and it's about now growing, but with a bit of with more of rationale, with more on focus on the strength of your unit economics. And this is something every VC also needs to participate in terms of this change in mindset, not just on the startup side. In terms of investment appetite, on the seed stage, the investment appetite is still there. We totally believe in احنا we're in the right place at the right time. مصر زي ما قلنا بيحصل فيها digital transformation, بيحصل فيها المانديت بتاع ال financial inclusion. All this shift is happening whether we like it or not. It's a good shift. And it's something we need to definitely tap on. It's a very, very young population. It's a growing population. We're at the intersection of Middle East and Africa. The pros of being both. الدisruption اللي هيحصل وبيحصل في الريل estate market is something that startups will capitalize on. الدisruption اللي بيحصل الأكيد بيحصل في logistics. The infrastructure بتاعت اللوجيستكس بتاعت مصر كلها بتتغير. مش بس بتكلم على الطرق والكباري، لا بتكلم كمان على المونوريل والقطارات الجديدة والكلام ده كله. This is a massive change in the logistics ecosystem. And with that, there's a massive opportunity for startups. فاحنا نفسنا we're not stopping investment. We're part of a network of venture capitalists across the world. تبع Founder Institute اللي هي VC Lab. And I'm in talks with over 500 venture capital funds كلهم seed stage أو معظمهم seed stage. And all of them are not freezing yet. Maybe it's the bigger funds putting bigger tickets. They are the ones that are freezing and بيقولوا هنستنى another 6 to 9 months and revisit. But at the seed stage, things are still on the go.
Moving back to Ameer, you're the sort of the newest person to join VC investing. I think you joined it yesterday. Was announced.
I announced yesterday. كان بقالي أربع شهور بس لسه مطبع.
يعني لسه جديد خالص. طب can you sort of tell us أول حاجة about the shift from being an entrepreneur and a founder to a funder? How is that shift and your outlook moving forward in terms of Khwarizmi's investments in Egypt?
Yeah, well, shift definitely very different. واحد بيبقى founder hands on بيعمل كل حاجة بإيديه و operational. طبعا يعني I joined the VC side يعني بالintention ان انا hopefully اساعد founders آخرين بالexperience ديت. بس طبعا on the VC side يعني أكبر حاجة ان هو ايه الواحد يتعود ما يقربش اللي هو just giving the advice. طبعا level of stress يعني is definitely much less عن running a business. طبعا لو fund بفند ريز برضو ممكن يبقى عنده level stress محترم.
ايوه كده.
بس انا الحمد لله وانا بختار فند يعني ايه قلت انا عايز اجوين فند اوريدي الفندنج بتاعه خلص فانا ايه هنروح نديبلوي على طول فده فالدنيا الطف يعني.
It's been mentioned I think by the
on this point.
طب لا please طبعا اتفضل.
مش عارف امسك نفسي. Starting a venture capital fund from scratch is a startup.
Yeah,
absolutely.
عادة يعني it takes sometimes up to 2-3 years for someone to fundraise. بس يعني my case كانت ألطف بس يعني.
كانت أسهل يعني.
لأن I'd like startups to know that as well. And maybe back to the empathy point, it also creates another empathy. We kind of sit on the same side of the table ساعات. لأنه we're working on fundraising for our fund. I don't know if everyone knows, typically funds go on several closes until they get the full amount. And we still do the يعني start investing or deploying capital as we're fundraising. It's an ongoing process. ولما بيتقال لنا لأ زي الستارت اب لما بتقول لها لا we wake up to rejections every single day and just keep going on. ويمكن sometimes we may even take it more personal لأنه الستارت اب ممكن يتقال له لا عشان البرودكت أو عشان business model. In our case it's لا because I don't trust you guys in managing my money. It becomes very very personal. Just for everyone to know in a VC fund especially and fund one is a startup for sure.
يعني I absolutely agree and I've been through that process before, so it's a very rough journey. But going back to sort of what I've heard you guys speak about is that sort of at the seed stage there's still opportunities, you're still investing and nobody has sort of fear of what's going to happen next. But I sensed from a number of people that for the companies that are about to scale, the picture is slightly different. So can you tell us what keeps you up at night from companies that you've invested in that are sort of in the Series A, Series B and haven't fundraised or have just closed the round? What would be sort of your fears for them or advice?
طيب هو مبدئيا في VCs الحمد لله كتير جدا بينفستوا في مصر يا اما VCs based في مصر يا اما في الريجن بينفستوا في مصر. بس لو تبص كده على اللاندسكيب هقول ان فوق ال 90% منهم are early stage investors. فدي ميزه وعيب. الميزه ان شاء الله ال early stage companies they have a lot of capital to choose from, lot of VCs to partner with. العيب ان مفيش enough growth stage capital that is local to the region. ف local to the region means ان هو الكور mandate بتاعهم الريجن او الكور mandate بتاعهم مصر. فاللي بيحصل مثلا احنا كنا عارفين ان في جروث ستيج في سيز كانوا بينفستوا في مصر وما شاء الله انفستد في ستارت ابس كتيره جدا في مصر وفي الريجن، بس معظمهم ان ما كانش كلهم مصر is an opportunistic mandate for them. It is an emerging market mandate, it is an emerging economy mandate او غيره، وفي طبعا منهم it's still a core mandate، بس هقول معظمهم it is not. فاول ما يحصل اول خبطه في الجلوبال ايكونوميك كرايسيس هيقول لك ايه let's retreat to الكور ماركت بتاعنا. ده اللي بيخوفني في الجروث ستيج ستارت ابس، ان هو دلوقتي في شح كابيتال في الجروث ستيج. There are very few VC firms that consider their region and Egypt as core mandate that can give you a $30 million ticket, $50 million ticket, $15 million ticket, which is probably what growth stage companies are looking for. فبالتالي in this market environment we are going back to all of our portfolio companies that are in this stage ونقول لهم what does يعني if it's becoming harder, what do you need to do to make sure that you are fundamentally attractive from a core business point of view to these companies, to these VCs أنا آسف. This is the problem. طب هنقول طيب ليه ما يبقاش في VC funds that are focused on growth؟ ما هو برضو فرخة ولا البيضة. احنا عندنا في كام growth stage growth stage startup موجودة في مصر دلوقتي؟ ما اعرفش اقول 15 يمكن في الرينج ده. فبالتالي can you build a VC fund focusing على تختار من pool of 15؟ لا، هي دي محتاجة وقت، وده طبيعي هيحصل بعد فتره. ان شاء الله في ستارت ابس بادئه كتير، ان شاء الله حبه منهم هي فانل، حبه منهم هيروحوا السيد ثم سيريز A ثم سيريز B، وبعد فتره هيبقى في enough growth stage companies، فبالتالي هيبقى في enough growth stage VCs. لو بدأناها بدري ونقول يلا نعمل growth stage VC دلوقتي مش هتشتغل، الايكونومكس بتاعت الفي سي مش هتشتغل، فبالتالي مش هينفع. فهي الفكره ده اللي بيخوفني، ان احنا ازاي نبني او ايه الادفايس اللي اديها للجروث ستيج كومبانيز at this stage. build a fundamentally good business. capital is scarce دلوقتي بالذات دلوقتي، فبالتالي focus on the right things in order to attract this capital. وانا شرحت لكم ليه at least في وجهه نظري دي fundamentally البروبلم دلوقتي يعني.
بس are international VCs stopping their investments or limiting their investments in Egypt and the region?
To be honest, that's not something we're seeing. We're actually seeing increasing appetite for investments in Egypt in general. I mean, even with the recent economic developments, Egypt is becoming, is offering great value at so many levels, right? Whether at an investment level or at talent level, et cetera, right? So, not to mention that the local market, the growth opportunity that the local market on its own, right, makes this market unique. I mean, there are not a lot of markets in our region that can claim that they can have homegrown unicorns without even crossing the borders of a market, right? So Egypt has got that superpower, if you like, okay? But again, just elaborating on your question, I think we're living in fortunate time. Yes, the global economy is going through a little bit of a uncertainty, if you like. But we're fortunate to be living in an environment where there is movement happening at multiple levels at the same time, at the heart of which is the startup ecosystem, right? And by that I mean regulation is evolving, technology infrastructure, investment is starting to flow, the number of VCs, the new additions to VC, the amazing talent that we see here and all over the country. All these are the foundations for building something that's sustainable over time. It's still early, we're still trying to unlock our potential, but we are definitely on the right trajectory. Is the appetite there from an investment standpoint? Yes, but let me just qualify that, okay? At the end of the day, the good thing about global crisis is they create a little bit of a reality check, right? Create some sort of a filter, right? But the fundamentals are the same. You're looking for a great team, a great value proposition, something that can scale and scale across borders and scale to north of $1 billion, right? All these don't change whether you are in crisis mode or not. If anything, what we're going through now helps us as investors and the founders sort of get into, appreciate what it means to be in bootstrap mode. Bootstrap mode is not something you start with and let go. Increasingly, the world is, the investment community wants to see startups continue with that at least mindset, mentality moving forward. We spoke about this before in an earlier session about the idea of, there's been always this focus about, as you said, growth at any cost, right? Which is to build the unicorn at any cost. Today, the shift is moving into building camels instead of unicorns, right? So it's a very interesting analogy. Building sustainable businesses founded on solid, commercial and product value propositions that can withstand the test of time, right? That should not be optional, and that should not be just, okay, the economy going up, now that should always be a key driver. And as investors, that is one of the key areas that now, I guess global investors now are saying, yeah, we need to focus on these fundamentals to make sure that especially growth scale companies are, doing all the right things to be sustainable.
Actually, I'll come to that point a little later, but I'll move to Ameer, because we were discussing it before we just moved on stage about Egypt's current sort of ecosystem. Are we at a tipping point, given what, I know that you came back from MIT and you just had like a lot of discussion about the Egyptian ecosystem and the VC in general. Do you feel that Egypt is sort of at a tipping point or an inflection point of rapid growth?
Yeah. أنا بقالي سنة من ساعة ما step down يعني from my role operation role في البورد بتاع إتيدا و doing other activities about الإيكوسيستم في مصر، وفي برضه البروجرام بتاع MIT، وإسلام كان معايا لسه الأسبوع اللي فات في بوسطن في MIT. فأنا مقتنع إن الإيكوسيستم في مصر is يعني عنده البوتنشال almost أقوى من أي إيكوسيستم تاني في أفريقيا أو في المينا ريجن. with the right يعني interventions الايكوسيستم ممكن يبوم بشكل كبير جدا. في عندنا يعني كعدد founders وعدد ستارت ابس كبير جدا. انا مثلا الفند that I joined خوارزمي هم even before I joining والفند كله ما فيش حد مصري في الفند، تقريبا more than tilt الفند already invested في شركات في مصر وعندهم bigger plans of investing في مصر. ونفس الكلام برضو في رائد، نفس الكلام يعني معظم الريجنال فاندز. يعني مثلا يعني لما فكرت ان انا اموف تو ذا في سي سايد، اتكلمت مثلا مع 10 ريجنال وجلوبال في سيز كلهم بيدوروا على ناس بارتنرز في مصر علشان كتر ما شايفين مصر از ا فيري فيري هوت توبيك هوت ماركت. فانا شايف الماركت في مصر فيري فيري اكسايتنج. في طبعا ابس اند داونز والجلوبال ماركت، بس في دلوقتي كميه ناس في different entities في حكومه، في وزارات، في organizations non governmental organizations، في بنوك، ففي يعني وسياسيا it's very important. فاعتقد احنا فعلا في tipping point. hopefully لو الدنيا ظبطت في مصر البوتنشال بتاع الايكو سيستم في مصر هيبقى اكبر بكتير جدا. واعتقد يعني حته الجروث ستيج I think there is like more than 20-30 growth stage companies في مصر. في 1 or 2 unicorns لو عندنا فوري وسويفل. مصر has the potential of having 10 plus unicorns in the next few years لو فعلا الماركت فعلا كله aligned و everybody is supporting الايكو سيستم دوت يعني.
هرجع لك رافع عشان I've heard you speak multiple times about when you're assessing an investment opportunities, you're very keen on the team, the unit economics, or specific other points. But I would like you to share what things or what elements do you look for when you're assessing an investment opportunity, and did that change pre the current situation to what's happening globally now?
Sure. Well, the first thing we look at is the team. And it's not just about the team, it's the team dynamics. عايزين نتأكد انه التيم ده بيعرف يشتغل مع بعض، بيكملوا بعض وهيكملوا المشوار مع بعض على قد ما نقدر طبعا. وفي element ما اعرفش اترجمه وما اعرفش اقيسه بالمسطره اسمه الجدعنه. بنبص عليها وبندور عليها، ودي حاجه عمر ما الفي سي اللي في امريكا هيعرف يقيس الجدعنه في فاوندرز مصريين ولا لا. ف this is a very very crucial element بنقيسها او يعني بنبص عليها. بنبص على السكيلابيلتي لان احنا في الاخر ما هو برضه كل في سي brings something to the table وكل واحد فيهم يعني احنا كلنا as VCs بنبقى عايزين نعمل achieve بيسموه ال coherence triangle of احنا كتيم competence بتاعتنا والنتورك بتاعتنا ايه الانفستمنت thesis ايه والبورتفوليو companies ايه they have to be cohesive مع بعض. in our case it is helping our startup scale globally. فلازم نبص على ان الشركه فيها the potential of scaling into other markets وان احنا نعرف نستفيد من النتورك بتاعتنا to help that particular business scale. In relation to what's happening now هرجع افكر شويه كان وارن بافيت اللي هو واحد من انجح الستوك ماركت انفسترز في العالم كان دايما كان one of his quotes is always invest in a company where if the market shuts down for 10 years you're still happy to be with. يعني لو البورصه قفلت 10 سنين واحنا دخلنا حد دخل في شركه عايز تبقى عارف ان الشركه دي يعني ابقى سعيد ان انا دخلت فيها. if we apply that على الفنتشر كابيتال ليفل ما خليهاش 10 سنين قوي بس اقول انه if the fundraising dynamic او cadence slows down which is expected across the world we still want to invest in companies that are fundamentally solid and fundamentally doing something right. We're solving a real issue and solving a real problem معاهم تيم تقيل. طالما الفاندمنتالز دي موجودة regardless of the economic situation worldwide we're still happy to be in this company. فهي دي الحتة بس اللي احنا ما اتغيرتش احنا دايما بنبص من day one على اليونت ايكونومكس بس يمكن دلوقتي هنبص لها بنظرة أعمق شوية.
هرجع لوائل قال من في البداية على اتكلم على الفالويشن he touched upon valuation كده briefly. فأنا عايز أرجع الماركت لما نيجي نبص على الماركت في مصر earlier this year or حتى last year في ناس تقول the market was overheating things were overvalued ودلوقتي prices have sort of came down to maybe reasonable amounts. How do you see it يا وائل؟ Do you see valuation coming down or do you see them same as they were like 6 months ago and they're still healthy?
No, I think they're definitely going to come down.
So you mean they have not come down yet?
لا there is a lagging effect شوية يعني the first أول ما الماركت يضرب الجروث ستيج كومبانيز على طول الجروث الفالويشنز بتاعتهم will get tempered down. بعد كده earlier stage you start seeing it happening later and we're definitely seeing it happen now. I think there will be probably a correction في ال early stage valuations as well. The money will still be more available في مصر for early stage than growth stage بس at different valuations.
Okay. نادر أنا هاجي لك بالنسبة للفinTech. الفinTech space you're very bullish على where Egypt has the huge potential. Can you sort of elaborate on that and if these fintech companies can expand beyond their border?
That's a very good question. So, and it's a layered answer, unfortunately, so bear with me. First of all, context matters, right? So, the context of fintech in Egypt is financial inclusion is a national priority, right? And that translates into one, obviously, a big opportunity, but multi-stakeholder groups are coming together, okay, to drive or solve for this problem, right? Because it has obviously a social impact, but it has a massive commercial upside as well, right? Nclude in itself is a proof point of that because there's always been this debate whether fintechs are competing with banks, etc., around the world. Who's gonna eat whose lunch and all of that, right? We have such a huge opportunity in Egypt and such a massive challenge, okay, that no one alone can solve for it, right? So in Egypt, I think the conclusion, or definitely as part of the Nclude thesis, we came to the conclusion that it's all about partnership. And the fact that we have banks like the National Bank of Egypt, Bank Dukair, Bank Misr, the largest national banks in the country, companies like eFinance, EBC, technology infrastructure player in the country, investing and putting money behind supporting the startup ecosystem is a clear message, one of the opportunity, two of the priority, right? And three, to the commitment towards the fintech ecosystem in Egypt, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing that's unique about fintech is and I was speaking with some of the audience just a few minutes before coming here, was the future of finance is embedded. Okay, so fintech is increasingly seen as a horizontal, not a vertical, right? As an enabler to all industry. So whether you work in agriculture, whether you work in healthcare, education, etc., fintech has a role to play in what you do, right? And that's what makes this a huge sustainable opportunity, because you exist everywhere, right? And we have some amazing examples in Egypt, fintech-enabled companies. Mozera was one of our portfolio companies that, again, were agri-fintech solution. Again, demonstrating how you can take a whole sector and enable it through a fintech solution. The third, and to question of, can it cross borders? Absolutely yes. And we gotta believe that ourselves. And I think that's a big part of our challenge, right? Egypt sits not in the club of MENA or the club of Africa only. Egypt sits in the club of global emerging markets, right? When it comes to financial inclusion, the financially excluded in the world, 75% of them sit in 25 markets, right? Egypt is one of those 25. So if you create scalable local solutions out of Egypt that fit within this infrastructure, okay, they can work in Mexico, they can work in Nigeria, and they can work in Brazil, right? Because all these countries, as different as they are, they face similar emerging market challenges, especially in terms of infrastructure, financial inclusion, opportunities, etc., right? But we gotta believe that we can, right?
Very good. As the title of this session is called Investing in Uncertain Times, I'll ask Rafeh, what is the biggest risk you see in investing now?
No, I don't have an answer to that. That's a difficult question. It's the same risks I would see 6 months ago. Then again, of course, it's the follow-on funding that we want to see for our portfolio companies a year from now or 2 years from now. The good thing is, if we invest in a company today and their follow-on is a year from now, hopefully things would have stabilized across the world. So far, follow-on funding, when you trace follow-on funding and funding rounds in Egypt over the past year, الأرقام اللي بنشوفها السنة اللي فاتت في مصر أو السنة دي ما شفناش قبل كده خالص. So far the trend has been يعني exponentially growing in terms of sizes, number of large tickets and the size of those tickets. Follow-on funding should be a constraint, but so far it looks good.
Ameer, you were an entrepreneur 10 years ago when funding was very difficult and where you had a lot of challenges fundraising. Can you sort of walk us through the journey, the lessons learned that you've learned when you were fundraising back 10 years ago, and how you're seeing it become much easier now?
Yeah. طيب أنا الشركة ابتديت في 2009 ولونشت في يناير 2011 قبل الثورة بأسبوع، وقعدنا بعديها 5 سنين بوت ستراب لغاية ما دخلنا أول أكسلريتر اللي هو 500 ستارت ابس، وده كان يعني 50K ساعتها. وبعد كده قعدنا سنتين تانيين سيريز A وبعدين سنتين تانيين سيريز B، ويعني it was very very tough to fundraise. يعني غير اصلا ما كانش فيه ايكو سيستم when I started. بعد الثوره والقلق الانسرتينتي اللي كانت موجوده في مصر ساعتها it was much bigger uncertainty يعني في مصر، وكوفيد برضه was another uncertainty. يعني فشفت كل الحاجات دي. when I joined خوارزمي انا actually almost في اول اسبوع يعني almost جالي depression، يعني looking at all the pitch decks اللي موجوده من ستارت ابس across the region، valuations غريبه منها شركات اللي هو ايه يعني الناس بيقدموا كلها سلايد ديكس وريزنج 10 وات 50 وحاجات زي كده. فانا يعني ريسنتلي برضو شفت يعني في لندن بزنس سكول كان برزنتيشن بيتكلموا عن الفرق بين الفالويشن والبرايس، ان مش دايما يعني ان في قيمه للشركه وفي السعر بتاعها. and actually الفتره اللي فاتت بالنسبه لي the price was going up. The price is الديماند والسبلاي بيحدد يعني البرايس دوت، بس قيمه الشركه the value of the company is the same، بس الديماند والسبلاي وان في سبلاي اوف كاش يعني كتير، فمخلي الفرق كبير جدا. I think it will يعني to go to normal. انا بالنسبه لي ايام زمان ده يعني ستيل بالنسبه لي is the normal، واللي موجود اليومين دول بالنسبه لي غريب. ف I think things will go back شويه to normal. و I think يعني في برضه كان يعني بما الهايب بتاعت الفالويشنز وفيري هيوج راوندز، انا السيريز اي بتاعتي كانت 1.7، دلوقتي كان في ناس بيعملوا بري سيد multiples of this يعني في الباست فيو years. كان في يعني في فاوندر يعني قابلته من 6 شهور او لا 3 شهور، بقى له فتره بيريز وبيحاول يريز برضه بيج فالويشنز. الفاكتورز انفسترز يعني put into valuing the company فيها حاجات كتيره جدا ما بتتحسبش. يعني في الفاوندر بالبروفايل بتاعه بالباك جراوند بتاعه باكس كان شغال فين وكده، فمجرد ان انا قلت له يعني ايه you need to be flexible على حته الفالويشن، بعدها باسبوعين لقيته جه قال لي انا I closed the round. ف I think يعني في فاوندرز بي اوفر اوبتمايز جامد جدا على حته الفالويشن، خصوصا في الوقت اللي احنا فيه ده. I think people need to يعني get done with the funding عشان actually to get the work done، بدل ما احنا ايه حد عمال يفند ريز بيحاول يوبتمايز على valuation، والvaluation is يعني end of the day يعني it's not the biggest thing in my opinion يعني.
Well, if I were to go back to you and ask you, what advice would you give entrepreneurs that are fundraising now or have just recently closed a round? What advice would you give them, regardless of the stage they're in, whether seed stage or growth stage?
Build a company that has proper fundamentals, solving a real need. Make sure you ask yourself whether you have product market fit, and build the path to dominating the market that is based on good economics. That's like advice that you can give to any company at any stage. Is basically saying don't throw money down the drain. Do every dollar that you invest needs to be exactly that, an investment into something that is lasting in your company.
هروح لنادر. فينتك معروفين recently طالع سمعة ان هم they burn a lot of cash.
ليه كده يا أستاذ؟
Is that true? And what advice would you give fintech companies in the current landscape as well?
شوف أنا again I don't think يعني fintechs per se can be characterized as companies that burn a lot of cash outside the context of the ecosystem. They also generate massive revenues and have faster routes to profitability versus many other businesses, of course depending on which vertical you're operating on. So the idea of burning cash, or back to what I said earlier, or what Rafeh was saying, though, growing at any cost is not good for any business anymore, and definitely in the current climate. Okay. If there's something special advice that I would give for the fintechs is customer experience is everything, right? Because we love to talk technology and we love to talk about cashless societies and financial inclusion and all this beautiful big words. But guess what? Okay? The 100 million out there, محدش فارق معاه الكلام ده. محدش بيصحى الصبح يدعي يقول يا رب نفسي ابقى عايش في ديجيتال ايكونومي ولا نفسي ابقى عايش في كاشلس سوسايتي. الناس عايزه better education, better healthcare, better access to finance, right? Fintech sits at the intersection of impact and commercial opportunity, right? And it's perfectly positioned ان انت تحل مشاكل لناس كتيره قوي at a national scale, right? بس you have to design outside in. Okay, ما تفكرش بس ان انا شغال في vertical، لا فكر انا ازاي هحسن حياة the masses. Okay, because with that creates the demand, that creates the stickiness, and that unlocks long-term commercial gain, right? I come from a background of برضو building products, right? And we can be sucked into our own world easily, right? Of building the tech. لا خالص, right? It's always, you're going to have to be selling this thing to someone, and that someone needs to be driving your internal decisions. That's
Ameer, last words of advice to entrepreneurs. As a founder, previous founder, what advice would you give them today?
فور جروث ستيج انا مش عارف في جروث ولا لا، بس في جروث ستيج لسه سيكويا كانوا مطلعين جايدز قويه جدا فور كومبانيز تو مانج ذس تايم. لسه فيكم فولوينج مي اون فيسبوك هتلاقوا لسه حاطط بوست قبل ما اطلع على طول النهارده بعد سيكويا. For early stage, I think early stage have a much better advantage عن الجروث ستيج. amount of funds اللي موجوده في الريجن كويسه. It's all about فعلا building a real business بريل fundamentals بتسولف problem، ما فيش فعلا الحرق at all costs دوت. فانا بالنسبه لي anyone who's building a real business solving a real problem it's a great chance. و definitely في دلوقتي enough experience في الماركت. try to get as much advisors و mentors who have done it before to advise you بدل ما repeat same mistakes اللي قبليكم عملوها
رافع، أنا هسألك سؤال with a bit of a twist. لو جالك a friend of yours now وقال لك look, I'm considering doing a startup. Do you think it's a good time or it's the right time for me to start it now? Do you advise me to go ahead and start ولا wait a little bit? What would you say?
What I would tell that friend, honestly, is don't take my advice. Go and talk to potential customers, get their feedback, use an Excel sheet, test it out, see if they're willing to يحط ايده في جيبه ويطلع 10 جنيه من جيبه ويدفعها في anything that you're providing, and that is the real test.
And to the companies that you're investing in now, what words of advice, just like in one sentence or two sentences, what word of advice would you give them now? And I know you're investing at the seed stage.
In light of what's going on, the thing is, every penny coming out of the company has to either bring a new customer or improve the product to bring a new customer. If you're spending on anything else, it's a waste of money. If you're going and attending competitions and doing any other stuff of that sort that does not bring you customers or build your product, it's a waste of resources. And now you have to be very, very careful in managing your resources.
This is just a general comment. Any last comments, thoughts, ideas that anybody would like to share? Even questions that you think that I have not answered and it's worth discussing.
A couple of things. Sure. One is, this is like any adversity that comes with its challenges, it also creates opportunities, right? مش أول مرة نعدي في crisis, and sometimes speaking to many of the founders and many in the ecosystem في مصر وبره مصر, there is this whole negative spiral. Oh, what's happening around the world, and people start this pessimism is just a little bit contagious, right? So honestly, we need to get over ourselves because the opportunity remains massive, right? وما ننساش إن إحنا عدينا في ال 87s with Cisco, وفي 2000 طلع جوجل وطلع باي بال, وفي 2008 طلع اير بي ام بي, وفي 2020 طلع DoorDash and the likes, right? So there are massive global companies that were built on the back of such crisis. So don't be derailed, okay? And but you have to realize that there is a natural selection that's happening at the moment, right? So it is about survival for the fittest in many ways, right? And the fittest here is not the one with the deepest pockets or the stronger, for that matter. It's the one that's most adaptable to change, right? And that is the bottom line. That is your key criteria, I think.
Guys, any last thoughts, comments?
I think we're a resilient economy because we're resilient people. 99.9% مننا مش مولود في بقه معلقة ذهب. وعافر في حياته كتير، والمعافره دي بتخليهم يعرفوا يعافروا for their business as well. عشان كده في ستارت ابس كتير قوي من مصر في 2011 و2012 و2013 وكل اللي كان بيحصل، وبعد كده دخل يا دوب ابتدوا يفوقوا من ده، دخلت كوفيد عليهم ولسه شغالين ولسه بيكبروا ولسه بيعافروا. فالجدعنه المصريه will prevail.
عندي برضو one last thought. يعني زمان لما كنت فاوندر كنت متخيل يعني اغلب الفاوندرز كان الفي سي ساعتها قليلين جدا يعني في الريجن وفي مصر، فحد كان بايه حاسس ان دول الناس الجامده قوي الفي سيز دول بقى وبتاع، ودول اللي بيكنترول الدنيا. وبعدين فتره فاكر يعني الوهله كده كان ايه الفاوندرز هاف ذا هاير هاند في الدسكشنز مع الفي سيز. انا يعني عايز بس اقول يعني اني اول فاوندرز يعني موجودين هنا ان the real star في اي ايكو سيستم is the founder. وشغلانه الفاوندر دي بالنسبه لي اكبر، والسي او this is much more important than any VC in my opinion. وان في الاخر our job as VCs is to just support يعني bet on founders and support the founders. وبس يعني the star والناس اللي فعلا بيكريت الايكو سيستم وفعلا بيكريت الفاليو are the founders. فلازم دي المايند سيت تبقى عند اي فاوندر you're the one really building the value، واحنا we're all just here to support يعني. بس
انا هقول اخر حاجه نقطتين في الماركت اللي احنا فيه دلوقتي. unfortunately يعني في شركات مش هتعرف تكمل، وهقول unfortunately عشان هو اصلا بيحصل في العادي برضو. يعني ستارت ابس is a very risky business. No one's going there for the glory and everyone knows that the attrition rate is high. that's normal. بس اقول ان التشالنجز اللي موجوده دلوقتي ممكن تخلي في بعض الستارت ابس كانت ممكن تعيش مده اطول ما تعرفش تكمل. فانا هقول للناس اللي هي مصممه انها تعيش ومصممه انها تكمل مصممه انها تعافر ان وجودك حي كستارت اب في الوضع اللي احنا فيه ده it is going to help you to survive, because the others that are competing with you that will die, you have a chance to grow your business simply by just surviving and doing the right things. فما تستعجلش على الخير، ما تستعجلش على الرزق، ما تستعجلش على الجلوري اللي ممكن يجي بعدين. Focus on doing the right things, survive by doing the right things, and you have a chance to grow. دي النقطة الأولانية. النقطة الثانية إن إحنا ما تخليش أي في سي يقول لك تعمل إيه. بمعنى إيه؟ في في سيز ممكن يقول لك والله معلش الجروث ريت بتاعك قليل، مش معناها ان انت تقول طب خلاص احرق. في في سي ممكن يقول لك معلش انا كنت عاوزك تاكسباند هنا، تقوم هعمل زي طب خلاص عشان ياخد فلوسه هعمل اللي هو طالبه مني. لا، انت you have a plan. If this VC is not aligned with your plan, don't bend and change your plan for them. If it's really good advice, always take the good advice. But don't become a copy of whatever your VC tells you just because of that. فحتى في الماركت اللي احنا فيه دلوقتي كان بيقول لك ان او قبليها من فتره يقول لك grow at any cost. اللي VC اللي يقول لك كده ماشي شكرا، I'm not going to take that advice because it's fundamentally wrong advice. في الماركت اللي احنا فيه دلوقتي هتلاقي فيه يمكن بعض الفيسيز يقول لك برضه you're growing too slow. ماشي، هو most likely في الوقت ده الفي سي مش بيقول لك احرق، بس there's always two ways to understand any advice. Number one, don't change your fundamentals because of chasing money. Do the right thing always. Your survival is going to make it happen.
With these last words of advice and on a positive note, I'd like to thank my panelists for their time and insight. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause.